What's up guys, in today's video we are going to be designing a photography website from scratch in Figma. Now we're going to keep things pretty simple but also make it dynamic and fun and easy to browse. In the second episode of this video we will be turning this into Webflow, so if you guys want to see that make sure you subscribe and watch that when it comes out. So to start off, here we are in Figma. We are going to create a new frame and we are going to do it for MacBook Pro 14. That's usually what I do. Now for color palette, we are going to use something like this. So we have a black there, we have a slightly lighter black, we have a red/pink accent color, and this sort of gray. Now if we go here, we can add this to a color style. So let's create a style for this, blackest black. You can call it anything you want. You probably shouldn't be calling it blackest black, but that will work for what we're doing. Blackish, ready pink. Liam Neeson. It doesn't really matter what you call them. There's our color palette here. We are going to set this fill to the blackest black on our homepage. So this, everything inside this frame is always going to be that black. So we could make it bigger or smaller, and it's just going to be filled with that blackest black color. One thing that's going to help us when we get into the previewing of the site is going to be to add something like this. Now if you guys want to grab this exact header, there's a file for that in the description, so you can change it to whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, it's just so you can visualize the site once we go into preview mode, which is going to be something like this. So it looks more like your actual website. Without it, your design is starting right at the top, which is not generally how it's going to look. You want to set a layout grid. Now this is just going to help keep things a little bit more organized. So count, you want to set to about 12. Margin, I choose 80. This is just a rough sort of guide. Having a grid just helps keep things a bit more organized. Saying that, we're about to break the grid completely with our header. So here we have a box. I'm just going to drag in an old logo of mine. I say an old logo, it's still my current logo. Ideally you want to be using vectors, but it doesn't really matter. As long as it's big enough and you can export it big enough, it'll be sharp enough. Okay, so there we have the logo. We're just going to call that logo. And we're going to duplicate this across here. Delete the logo part itself, but we want to keep the frame. And we are going to change the fill of that to ready pink. So we're going to turn this red block into a button, and we're going to make it a higher button so anyone can hire. Let's go with enter. And we'll make this black. Ooh, that's bold. So higher, and let's maybe put this to 14, change this to 0, and make sure that's set in the center. So if we duplicate this out, call this work, we'll call this bio. I'm holding down Option and dragging. That's how I'm duplicating that. We are going to hold Shift and A and turn that into an auto layout component. Now we only have 2 of these. It's not completely necessary, but over here you can see spacing. So now we can adjust this dynamically based on the children within this auto layout, which is our links. So if we wanted to add more links, we could just add copy, paste, paste, paste. And then we can go into here and we could change that dynamically. But we only have the 2 links for now, so we will just keep it as it is, 40, and we will rename this to navigation. We will rename this to higher button. What we're going to do with this, actually, we are going to give it some padding. So we will give it 20 on each side and 10 on top. And we are going to give it 10 border radius. Now you can't see what I've just done there, but if I change the color to the background, you will see it has a background now. It's very subtle, but we are going to keep it like that for now. We might change that, and we're going to make sure that that is centered And there we have our header. So we are just going to group those and call it header. When we created this frame, it set an entire screen size of a MacBook Pro 14. Now, obviously, we now have this at the top. So to calculate the fold, what we're going to do is we are going to go back to frame. We're going to do MacBook Pro 14. And we are just going to drag this on the top like that. And we are going to minimize it down to about there. And we'll call this hero, and we will put the header inside that. This is the top part of our website. So we could change the color of that there, and we will now see that it sits perfectly within the preview. What we're actually going to do is we are going to put the logo, we're going to put all of it up here into fixed. If you don't see this fixed part, then basically what you want to do is make sure that you clicked on header, come over here and click fixed position when scrolling. And what that's going to do is that's going to lock it. So when you scroll here, it scrolls like that. But we don't want this ugly color. We want some big old jumbo text on the home page. So what we're going to do here, this is where it's going to start to get pretty cool. We're going to make this like 80 pixels. We're going to change it to this font here. That's quite cool. We might even make it bigger. So let's just say 100. We're going to duplicate that. Freelance photographer. Wow. And we are done. That is our website. I'm just joking. Not quite, but we're getting there. We are going to change this to a stroke. We're going to click that, and we are going to select the color Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson stroke. And for this, we are going to set this to our ready pink. So now we're going to add a photo. I'm just going to paste in some photos from Unsplash. For the sake of this tutorial, these are not my photos. We are also going to duplicate this, holding Option. We're going to slide it up. We're going to slide this down. And just so you know, I've also applied a drop shadow to each of these. Rotate them. Scale them down a little bit. And let's just reposition them so they look a little cooler. If it's jumping around like this for you, then basically what that's doing is that's snapping it into the frame of another one. But how you can get around that is by holding spacebar when you're dragging. It can be a little bit fiddly sometimes, but it works. So holding that and then spacebar. That's looking pretty cool. Now what we're going to do, we're going to drag that photographer part on top, and we're going to leave that behind because that's going to look quite cool. Let's increase the size to 150. That's maybe a little too big. Yeah, I think that'll work actually. So, freelance photographer. Now this could say anything really. I've just got this. Now that's looking pretty cool. If you click here on hero, you can see this is the bottom of the page. So if we jump back into the preview window, now we've got this. What we're actually going to do, we're going to take the background off of that because we do not need it. And what we're also going to do is we are going to create a circle like this. And we are going to make that circle red. And we are going to go to linear. And we are going to go to radial. And we are going to set this behind all of this. Now we've just added a little bit of depth to this, which is quite cool. And we could even have this rotating around the screen when we go into Webflow. The world is our oyster with this sort of stuff. I think what we're going to do here, we are just going to grab this option, drag, and we are going to put explore, scroll to explore. And we're going to set that to the bottom. You can hold Control and G to bring up your guide. As you can see, we're not completely flush in the guide right now, but it doesn't really matter. The guide will make a little bit more sense as we go on. So let's move this up slightly. Let's move this up slightly. And let's actually change the color of this to Liam Neeson. And let's set the size of that to 12. And let's change that to regular. And let's change these to bold. And 12. So that's looking pretty cool. One last final touch that we're going to do to this. So we set our background color to the blackest black. You might remember that, like we can change it here, but we want it to be blackest black. We're going to add something to this. So we are going to detach that style. It is still the same color. As you can see, you can color pick it there from our swatches. It's still the same color, but we are going to add an image to this. What we're going to add is this noise texture. Now this is just from Google. We can go file. We can change it from fill to tile, and we can resize it, and that's just going to repeat over our design. So this is going to give it a little bit of texture, which I think looks quite cool. Now we can go into it here, and we might want to change it to screen or lighten. And then we're going to adjust the opacity on that. Now, what is this going to do? Well, if you zoom in, you can now see that it has a little bit of texture, which makes it just a little bit different. It makes it more film-like, which makes it work well with the photography theme. You know what we're going to do as well? We do not really need that. So we are going to take that off and move that into the hero. So now, when you scroll, work and bio links don't get seen. This whole section was 902 pixels high, so we are going to make another section that is 902 pixels high. 900 is probably fine, but we will go 902. We can see by that red line that we are now sitting flush at the bottom of our top fold. And we will just drag this out just to make this bigger. For the second section, what we're going to do here, we are actually going to go up to width, and we are going to go /3. Now this is going to divide this by 1/3 of the size that it currently is. Look at that. Maths. Who would have thought Figma was so clever? We're going to just change the color of that to blackish, just so we can see it, and we are going to duplicate that out side by side to fill up this section. Now what I'm thinking here is showing some case studies of work, because if you're so as you can see, this has gone a little messed up here, and what's actually happened is that is set to scale for some reason, and it shouldn't have been, so left and top. We're going to change this back to 90. 90, 90. So here we have duplicated out this for our next fold. Now we're going to copy and paste in some more photos from Unsplash. Just some random images to show example. And if we go into here and scroll down, we'll now see that that sits perfectly in that fold. What we might actually do here is we will set this to a fill of black is black. So now when we scroll down, it's going to sit on top. So let's add some text to these 3 case studies. If we just go So let's just take this. We'll just duplicate this down into here, and that's going to put it inside the frame. And we are going to make this, just say 18. We are going to make it into our syncopate. And we're going to call this Vogue 2022 because it's totally not what it is. And we are going to duplicate this down. And we are going to turn this into our other font, which is Inter. And let's just change the size of this to 14. And give it a little bit of spacing, just around 20 to 30 pixels. Now that's looking pretty good, but that might be quite difficult to see, so we're going to turn that into a gradient using this rectangle. There's a few ways to do this, but this way works. So if we go into here, we can go into linear, and we can make this 0 opacity, and then this, we can make this black. Now if we go up here, sometimes Figma will do this weird thing with the gradient, so as you can see, it's going from black to gray to clear, but you can just change that to black, and that's going to fix that for you. And what we can do now is we can now set that underneath the text, and we have a bit better contrast there. So as you can see, I'll turn it off and on. That helps a little bit. You can reduce the opacity, but we'll just leave it at that for now. And we are going to change the color of this to reddy pink. Now what we can do is we can select all of that and group that. We can call that campaign text, and we can duplicate this across. And we'll rename these. To something like that. So we are getting there. It's starting to take shape. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. Make sure that hasn't messed up our header. It shouldn't. If you're ever resizing the parent frame and you're finding that your layout's getting really messed up, just have a look at how the constraints are on its children. So before I had that set to scale, so when I dragged this, it was resizing things, and that's not what you want. You want it kind of locked in when you're working for the web, for the most part. So we are now moving on to the third fold, and we are going to make another frame, and we are going to make sure it's 902 pixels, and we're going to call that categories. We're going to stick that below. Make sure it's in our parent div. We should probably name these, so we are going to make that into a frame. And we are going to call this campaigns. Now we're going to grab these two headers from above and just pull that down into our categories. And let's rename this to Explore Works. Now creating a frame that is the same size as the fold makes it easier because you know the size that you're sort of dealing with. If you're wanting this to sit flush and nice on a 14-inch MacBook, then you know you've got to make it sit nice within this window. Go into our grid using Control and G and just line this up. Not that it's really necessary, but that's looking quite cool. We could have that overlap. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Duplicate this down, and let's call this editorial. And let's change the size of that to around 40, maybe 50. And let's change the color of that to white. Duplicate this down. Actually, we're going to slide this along, and we are going to choose a number. We are going to get rid of the fill on this, and we are going to add a stroke, and we are going to give this stroke that reddy pink color. We want to make sure that both of these are lined up. We're going to move this so it's in the third column, and we are going to move this so it's in the third column from the right, and we are going to make a line that is 4 pixels and is red. Then we want to give it about 40 pixel spacing to there. Make sure it's centered. And that's looking quite cool. We are actually going to reduce the size of that to 2. Using Command and highlighting that, we can now drag that down. Now we're going to make sure that it's all 40 pixels separate, and we're going to change the names to portraits, environments, experimental. I'm going to change the number of these to whatever. So we select all these. We might want to center them. The 11 looks a little different, so just for the sake of the design, I'm going to change that to 09. Here, we want to select the colors, and I think we're going to change that to Liam Neeson. And here, I'm going to select these, and I'm going to change the color to Liam Neeson. Why? And we've changed the color of these because this is showing the example of this being hovered over. What we will also do is we will paste in another image from Unsplash. So this image here. So what we have now is we have our hero. Scroll down, now we have our campaigns, and these could have cool hover once it's coded in Webflow. And here Explore works, and this is a really easy way for the user to see what different categories you work with. If they hover over one of these, it's going to turn it white with red, and it's going to have an appropriate image that's going to follow their cursor around. I think what we have to do though, we do have to make this all a little bit smaller. I think that's going to look nicer if it's slightly smaller. And we can actually keep those the same. We select this whole part. We can slide that up a little bit. It's quite cool. Now we're going to change the background color of this to blackish, and that gives us some separation from what will be our last fold, the footer area, which is what we're about to do now. So let's hold Option and pull this entire thing down, and we will just sit that below it. Now we're going to use some parts of this. So how we're going to change this: first we're going to rename it footer, then we're going to go into here and we're going to change that. We're just going to get rid of that because we're going to have that sit on the background. So there we go, that's gotten rid of that. We're going to change this to let's shoot. And this whole section we don't need anymore. So we're going to delete that. Now we're going to borrow some stuff from the header too. So we are going to copy this background gradient. We're going to paste that in there, and gosh, we need to change that. So we're going to make it around that. That's going to be fine. We're going to move this down. Now this is going to be the last slide that the user scrolls to, so it's important that we have the right information there to capture a potential customer, given that's what the purpose of the site is for. It's to show work and get new customers. Let's open our grid here, and we are going to make a box. Let's make it slightly more than half. Let's just make it around 215 pixels high. And we are going to give this a fill of blackest black, the classic reliable blackest black. We're just going to duplicate some things, so let's take this, copy, paste that in here. Now let's change this to work with me. And then, gosh, we can even take this. The thing is, reusing stuff on a website, it's not laziness, it's good to do. Consistency with things like this is key for websites. Now, I'm being pretty rough with it, to be honest. So that's quite cool. And then we will move this along. Match that up to the grid. Resize it. Now you can hold Command as you resize in, then that's not going to mess up the stuff that's inside your frame. And we can change this to follow me on. Make sure this is the same. See, this is where I'm being a little sloppy, but it's fine. Twitter. And why not add TikTok as well? There we got 2 boxes. What we might do with this though is get rid of that fill. We might make that stroke. It's quite cool. What we can do here as well is we can, and what we're going to do is we're going to move this inside the frame of this box here, and we're going to drag that diagonal. Now what this is doing with this being diagonal, it is mirroring this theme that we had at the beginning. Now there's a lot of consistency with themes going on here. We have the outline stroke, which comes up quite a few times. We have the angular red. We have the overlaying sort of shapes here. And then when we come down here, this just makes sense, and it's tied in with that sort of backwards gradient. So every part of this looks consistent, and it's all because of reusing those elements. Now we're going to add in this crudely cut out image of me, and that just adds a face to the name at the end of the website. We're going to change the size. And then we might want to copy the logo, paste that down here, change the opacity on that to about 20%. Take this, pull this down. Make this, we're going to make this small. And we'll align that right, just for the sake of it. And we're going to just neaten things up to our grid. Now just for a final little touch, we're just going to add some images in here. This little aperture logo, that'll sit nice there. For the follow me box, maybe just some kind of social icon there that fits with the red theme. And that is us pretty much done. So as you can see, we have our sticky nav. These images kind of load up in a cool way, and this text is maybe floating along the way, like on a continuous reel. And as you scroll, that these photos kind of expand out the way. As you come down here, I think probably you don't have the text, or we have some kind of cool hover where the images is getting bigger as you scroll onto it and the text is popping up, something there. And we will explore that in the second episode in the Webflow version of this video. You come down here, we could definitely have some cool sort of animation going on with the texts here. That hover state's going to look really good. And then as you scroll down here, this could be quite dynamic too, with some subtle animations too. As a last finishing touch on this, now you guys can tell me if this is going to ruin it or not, but this might be cool. If we go into the hero section, we are going to select the pencil tool. It is not a tool I use very often, and we are just going to do a bunch of squiggles. We are going to select this, we're going to change this to 1, and we are going to change the opacity of that to about 10. We're going to move that along, and we're going to move this down here. What are we thinking of this? There could be some cool animation going on there. Bit of that rough around the edges sort of vibe. We could even add that into different parts. So into the footer, we could also add this. Something like that's quite cool. So there we have it. That is all for today's tutorial. If you guys like this and you want to see me build this out in Webflow, then make sure you subscribe, and I will catch you guys soon in another video.